Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of A Handful of Hope. I am so happy and grateful to have Jack Canfield with us here today, who is the co-creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. He's developed 42 New York Times bestsellers and holds a Guinness Book of World Records for having 7 books on the New York Times bestseller list simultaneously. Known as America's #1 success coach, Jack has studied and reported on what makes successful people different. Over the last 40 years, his compelling message, empowering energy, and personable coaching style has helped hundreds of thousands of individuals achieve their dreams. He's been a featured guest in more than 1,000 radio and television programs in nearly every major market worldwide. He lives in Santa Barbara, California. Jack, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Jesse. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's reading your bio and saying you've been on over 1,000 radio and television shows worldwide. We were just talking beforehand how you've done 40 of podcasts now in just the last few months. It's very indicative of the changing times. I know so much of your business and so much of what you do has been based on live events in the past. How have you been adjusting both personally and professionally to everything that's been going on the last few months?
Well, first of all, I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We got $1 million in deposits for trainings that we had lined up for here in Washington, D.C., in San Diego, and so forth. And if we have to give all that back, we've spent part of that, as you do. You spend it on the hotel deposits, you spend it on your staff and so forth. So it was like, uh-oh. And so it was like scary. And, after a day or two of that, okay, we said, okay, let's get real here. Let's create some online programs. Let's see if we can pivot people into those programs. My sales team was on the phone for over a week with just one-on-one calls with people, sharing the issue that we have and wanting to make sure they got value for what they'd signed up for. And we got through that with most people saying, fine, we'll do online things. We'll put it off into the future for when we can do trainings again. So that got us over the big fear of having to almost go bankrupt in terms of the cash flow. And then we started developing these online courses, which have done very well. We did a train the trainer course, 3 days, where we actually were training people to deliver seminars, and we were able to break them up into small groups of 4 or 5 people presenting, getting feedback from one of our trainers, and we had 50 people in that group from 7 countries. So we learned a lot about the technology and how to do that. We're planning a year-long program and a 4-month program that we're starting in July that will be very, very exciting. So we're just finishing developing that, start marketing next week. So we've had to pivot. And the other thing that happened was that we were very fortunate to, I pay attention to the news. So applied for a payroll protection plan loan very quickly. And we got one. And so it basically paid our staff salaries through the end of July. But then it was like, what do we do in August? And at that time, we weren't having a lot of cash flow. We got more now, but it's not enough to keep everyone up to speed. And we don't want to fire anybody because these people have been with me some 20, some 12 years. They're family, and they have families, and they depend on us for their livelihood. And so I said, what can we do to help fill in the blanks if we have because what I did a bunch of years ago during the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, is we only had 5 employees at the time. And so I said, we don't want to fire anybody. Let's all take a 20% pay cut, including me and Patty Aubrey, who's the co-director of my company. And we managed to get through it that way. And so I thought, well, we could do that again, but a lot of people depend on its salary. Is there a way we could increment that? So we actually all joined a multi-level marketing company, which sells essential oils, which everyone in my company got involved with. And they're all actually doing very well. We're the fastest growing team in that company's history. We get calls from corporate office going, what are you guys doing? You're amazing. You've gone from 30 people to 781 people in 2 months in your organization. And we're just coming from service because these essential oils help people. I was just reading yesterday that 40% of Americans describe themselves as clinically depressed right now. And there's a lot of research that would indicate that's true. And with the George Floyd thing going on and everyone realizing there's all this stress and what it means to grow up Black, I mean, just growing up Black in an urban environment almost guarantees you have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So the reality is we're finding a lot of these oils actually help de-stress, calm, get rid of PTSD, et cetera. So it's become part of our service into the world to be helping people. I was talking last night with one of my trainers who's African-American who lives in Minneapolis, Rick Petrie, and he's a lawyer, teaches at a law school there as well. And he's been integrating all these success principles I teach into the law faculty, into the courses. And he's now suing the police department, and as a black man in Minneapolis. And so we talked about that. How can we help him? And we started talking about these oils as a way to de-stress and the adversarial nature of law and the law school and all that. So that's something we've also done that I'm very excited about, and learning about that, and our staff's doing well with that. And I feel like we're making a huge difference in the lives of people with something I was totally unaware of 5 months ago. Didn't even know this existed. Turns out that these oils have frequencies that literally are healing in the body, that build the immune system. They help you sleep better. I'm sleeping through the night now. My wife has had restless leg syndrome. She puts a little lavender oil on her feet and she falls asleep. She doesn't wake up for 6 hours. Friend of mine, his ex-wife, never slept through the night. She took something called Northern Idaho spruce, put that in her diffuser. She and her cat fell asleep within 5 minutes, and she slept for 5.5 hours. She hadn't done that in 20 years. So there's these magical things. So I'm very much into that. I'm very much into looking at any institutional racism that might be in our own company. I mean, I have a woman who married a black person who's got a biracial daughter, and thinking she'd done what she needed to do. She married a black guy. I'm not racist. But then she started to see some of the unconscious racism that exists in her, that exists in our company, that exists in the world, in Hawaii, where she lives, which is very multicultural. And so that's a big thing that we're focusing on. And then I would say the last thing is, because I'm doing so much online, I'm sitting here a lot. I'm making sure I exercise every day, but it's challenging because I got up at 5:30 this morning to do a podcast in India, which was late night for them, but trying to do something in India during the day, they're all asleep. And then spending time with my wife, because often I'm getting up early in the morning, I'm working till late at night. And so balancing that has been another thing that's been challenging for me. But we've pivoted and we're making it work. Everybody's on board. Everybody realizes we're talking not about the new normal, but the new better. What can we learn from this? For example, for me, I just did a workshop online. It was a keynote speech, really, for a major international company that has 7,000 people online listening to my talk. They were working from home. They wouldn't have been able to do that normally. I would have gone to Bermuda, would have taken a day to get there, would have done my talk probably for 300 or 400 top management people, and then I would have had a day of fly home. So 3 days out of my life for a fee that I got for 2 hours of speaking in front of my computer, and to reach 7,000 people instead of 300 people. So I'm going like, that's better. So that's not the old, I don't want to go back to the old normal. I do miss live seminars when people are laughing, when you can get people up doing shoulder massages and do experiential partnership exercises with them and so forth at the same level. And we'll get back to that, whether we get a vaccine or herd immunity or whatever happens. It might, people say a month, a year, 2 years, 3 years. Some people say it'll be 9 years, economists, before we recover the economy. I don't know that that's true. I hope it's not. Could be. So we have to be ready for whatever it is. And I'll just end with this. I'm giving you a long answer, but I teach something called E plus R equals O, which says there are events in life. You have a response to that event that equals the outcome. And often the event changes. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Hey, you're doing 4. You're getting the middle class income. You're happy. Everything's working. And all of a sudden, COVID-19 comes along and goes 0. So 0 plus 2 equals 2. Half your income, half the fulfillment. You don't know if you can pay your mortgage. All the stuff that comes up. Am I going to live? Am my parents going to live? And then we've got to change what we do to 4. If we want 4, if we want what we used to have, we got to do more. We have to step out of our comfort zone, because 0 plus 2 is always going to equal 2. So the world's always changing. Someone said the only thing that's constant is change. And whether it was the Gulf War or 9/11 or COVID-19, the recession in 2008, 2009, there's always things to deal with. And being older, I lived through the Vietnam War, the Iraqi War, the Afghanistan War, different recessions. There are people alive who lived through World War II. People still alive who were in concentration camps who are saying, COVID-19, no big deal. Try that one. So I think that for me, I remember when Napoleon Hill said, every negative event has a seed in it of an equal or greater benefit. So knowing that, and that being 75 like I am and seeing that show up many times in my life, looking back at what I thought was a terrible event and going, oh, thank God that happened. If I hadn't lost that job, I wouldn't have met W. Clement Stone. I wouldn't have learned about the
Mm.
success principles. If I hadn't lost that job, I wouldn't have gone back to graduate school and worked on my doctorate. So the reality is that while this is very difficult, we're getting time right now to think about our lives, to realize maybe wasting all that time in a commute and polluting the environment isn't the best way to live. Spend more time at home with our families and working from home, as many people are doing. Many companies are now saying, hey, we're not going to require everyone to come in every day, every now. This doesn't make sense. We're getting more efficiency and more productivity, people working from home. Someone like you got inspired to make a bigger difference, which you're doing daily, several times a day sometimes. And I think also we're seeing that many of the things that we were doing, we're getting time to look at our own health. Were we exercising enough? Racism, have we been paying enough attention to that? Perfect storm, these two things coming together. We can't avoid each other. We're seeing that COVID-19 is not racist. So the results are racist, but our racist society, it's affecting poor people worse than rich people. But white people, black people, brown people, red people, yellow people, we're all getting COVID-19. So it doesn't give a shit about how much money you have, what your job is, where you live. And I think that's been interesting that we're all in this together. I think we all are starting to see we're all in this society together. And we're getting, when you think about all the people that aren't working, 1 out of 4 people that were employed are unemployed. When you think about all the kids that are not in school, all the college kids that graduated who thought they had jobs that don't, it's a perfect situation for people to take the time to be demonstrating, to be thinking about, to be looking at, to be reading and reflecting on their own racism, and to be addressing these issues and not letting up. Because normally Monday would come and you'd have to go back to work, you'd have to go back to school, and you kind of forget that you were at a rally the weekend. But they've been happening day after day after day after day. And the Congress is noticing, the mayors are noticing, the governors are noticing, and people are not taking their foot off the gas pedal and saying, look, we have to deal with this. So anyway, I think there's a lot of good coming out of it.
Yeah, I was actually meditating on that this morning, and that came to me as, gosh, would this movement be as big if COVID hadn't happened and had so many people at home sheltering in place, having time for them to have that reflection, having time for them to be more introspective, having time for them to pay a little bit more attention, and freeing them of so much of the daily distractions we have when the alarm clock rolls off at Monday and we go ugh or whatever comes out of our mouth to start our week over again. And it seems like it's just been, and especially with so much of the constant stream of, it seems, frustration around COVID, what to believe, what not to believe. It seemed like it was a perfect emotional stew for something like this to happen, for people to really feel compelled to act and feel compelled to, again, keep your foot on the pedal.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's totally true. It's true. We've been social distancing really well. I haven't left the house, I mentioned, only 2 times. And we've had 4 friends come over and sit 6 feet apart outside, and we've talked. And there are people that are healthy and so forth, as we are. And it's all we talk about. So it's something. I mean, we talk about other things too. Your knee hurts when you're 75. You always have to have that conversation with people. But other than that, I mean, that was the conversation for 2 hours that night with 2 friends of ours. And then the other couple that came over, one of them is black, and just talking about his experience of what that's like for him, and being a professional living in Santa Barbara, which is a pretty white-oriented community. And so it's been intriguing, and I think it's good. It's healthy. It's kind of like you've got a underlying condition that you didn't know you had, and then all of a sudden you had a CAT scan and you discover you have cancer, and you go, oh God, that's about all you can talk about, because it's the big C. And so we have a cancer in our society. And what's unfortunate, someone once described in a blog they wrote that we are a heart attack culture with cancer, which means that, when you have a heart attack, it really gets your attention, and you change your diet, you become a vegan like, President Clinton did, you start exercising more, you get better sleep, because it really rocked your soul, and the cancer kind of sneaks up on you slowly. You don't know it's coming. And so we don't notice the cancer until we have a heart attack. And then George Floyd's murder was a heart attack, and so it got our attention. And unfortunately, people have been screaming and yelling for centuries, ever since slavery ended, which it didn't really, but basically it ended in terms of its legalization. And so what happens is that we now are having to wake up to our x-ray and say, look, let's look at this and really go. What do we do? How do we change our diet, our exercise in terms of racism, as well as in terms of our immune system? I mean, we know that the main people that are dying from COVID, one of the things that's common to many of them is overweight. And their immune system, when you're overweight, your immune system goes down. When you live in fear, when you live in stress, which many people do, your immune system goes down. So learning to meditate, learning to exercise, getting back into your ideal weight. I've lost 15 pounds in February when I was in India. I went over there with that in mind at a clinic, and also detoxing. When I got back, when I started on the essential oils, I stopped it. My appetite changed. I've lost another 6 pounds.
That's awesome.
So
Congratulations.
it's really good. And so I feel my immune system is really strong. The supplements I take and the sleep I'm getting and all of that. So I think all of us need to take a look at that.
Jack, I want to bounce back to business real quick and then come back to here.
Sure.
I know, having been able to sit in the seminar room with you several times, I know those experiences are extremely meaningful for everyone in attendance. And I've talked with a lot of entrepreneurs, people in the coaching space, and where in-person events was a big part of their business. And one of the things that they've been really wrestling with is in migrating over to online space is, how do you replicate the meaning of the classroom? How do you replicate that emotional connection that people have where the group bonds? And I'm wondering if you've found any key ahas, insights you might share of what you and your team are doing to kind of replicate some of that magic that is in the classroom in a virtual environment.
Well, one of the things we used to do in our live trainings was we'd open the doors, we'd have loud music on, great dance music. We'd have our whole assisting team, about 20 or 30 people lined up in kind of a cornucopia. We'd dance people in, high five them and all that. So what you're talking about is, how do you engage them other than being listeners? And so we will start with like 3 minutes of dance music and say, get up in front of your computer. Either I or someone else will dance to the music and say, follow our moves. Or we might get some dancer and say, look, everyone imitate that person. Or maybe we have 3 or 4 dancers. And we used to do that in a training room, just bring someone up on stage and everyone would imitate their moves the best they could,
Yeah.
And it would make it less awkward trying to be cool yourself, whatever. So we do that. We have games we play. There's certain games you can play with people where you get them into pairs and have them do something silly. You can mirror each other, like you put your hands up and you got to follow my hands. We do that live. We can do it online. If I can divide you into groups of 2 on Zoom, which we can hit a button and all of a sudden you have a person. I can divide you into a pair or a group of 3 or 4 and give you each a minute to share what's your greatest challenge right now since COVID-19, or what's your greatest economic challenge, or what's your greatest relationship challenge. We can talk about your greatest success before you were 18, things that begin to bond people that way. One of the things that we've done is, normally we would do an eye staring not contest, but an exercise where you would just look in each other's eyes and you would kind of get in touch with the person's soul. And so we have everyone look at their screen, project as much love as you can, and then start running groups of people across the screen. And the feeling of love comes forward, so we can do that. We can have people chatting, constantly, how many of you, whatever, and then they put it in the chat. We do polls where, here's 5 things. If you've read my book, you haven't read my book, you've taken a seminar, you haven't taken a seminar. But we can do things like, how many of you on a scale of 1 to 10 feel like you're winning in the area of relationships? And then very quickly we can see what's going on, and then we can respond to that in real time. We can have people share. I can process somebody in front of the group, which I used to do, and everyone would, what happens is we all have pretty much the same issues, but we don't, and we resist being vulnerable about it. But let's say you say, I want to work on this issue, and I work it through with you, and you have a breakthrough. Everyone else who has that same issue has a breakthrough along with you, it's a change in belief, a change in letting go of some fear, whatever it might be. So we do that as well. And as I said, go ahead.
Oh, do you find people are, with them being able to do Zoom from their home, do you find that they seem to be willing to be a little bit more vulnerable or less vulnerable in the sharing process and engaging?
More vulnerable.
More vulnerable.
Because when you break them into a small group, 2 or 3 people, it's quiet in that group. one person talks at a time. There isn't all that noise and distraction of 200 or 300 people around you. They know that no one's going to overhear them other than the two people they're talking to. When we were doing presentations with feedback for our Train the Trainer program online, which we have, we would have 4 people in a group. We'd have one of our senior trainers in there, giving feedback. And people said they felt safer because it was just 3 people. Whereas normally we'd be in groups of 12 and they'd be giving feedback. And so they liked it better. And the other thing we're finding is that we're getting more people enrolling in our courses because they don't have to fly from India or fly from Florida or fly from Germany. No visas required. Some countries you can't get visas anyway right now, because of the coronavirus. And it's cheaper. They don't have to pay for a hotel room and food, and it's in the comfort of their own home. And so it's worked out very well.
Jack, I want to switch back over to the race and some of the social issues that we were talking about. You mentioned. Sure. So I think my observation is, and I'll speak as a white guy, is I've wanted to do something to help, something meaningful to contribute to the conversation, to what's going on. And the fear that I've resisted for a long time was this fear of, in the age of trial by Twitter, as a white guy, I could say the wrong thing, that then it's a 10-second soundbite that runs on Twitter. And I go to bed with thinking I did something really good. And I wake up in the morning and I'm public enemy number 1, thinking of myself as that important. Right. And so I've wrestled with what it was, and what really kind of helped me move was that Martin Luther King Jr. quote about the white moderate. I'm paraphrasing Dr. King, but the white moderate that is unwilling to act, who is sympathetic to the cause but doesn't speak up. And that's a long way of asking, do you ever wrestle with, having gone through all the experiences you had, and I know we were talking beforehand about having marched with Dr. King in the civil rights time, writing the books, doing the talks, do you still ever have that point of questioning yourself if you should act with something like this? And if you do, how do you reconcile it with yourself?
I don't have the question of should I act. I have the question of how I should act, when I should act. And it took me about 4 or 5 days to write something for Facebook about the George Floyd situation and the racism. I mean, George was just the powder keg fuse that went off. So it's not the George Floyd situation, it's the racism in America that's there. But I wanted to say something that was meaningful. I wanted to say something that was helpful. I wanted to say something that acknowledges all the people. And I wanted to say something that would not be something that would get kicked back. Can I live with that? Yes. In the book, White Fragility, the author talks about the importance of being willing to take the risk, that the engagement is what's important. And if you take the risk, you're going to learn from it, and the learning is what's really important. The willingness to engage, to be vulnerable. It's the people who are so afraid to say something wrong, so afraid of being accused of being a racist, whatever. And, there's some people who've made some statements that I think were pretty good, and they got a lot of kickback, and some of it from past behavior. Well, if that's so, why did you do that? NFL, director, commissioner, and so forth, with the Kaepernick thing and the knee on the ground with the, Pledge of Allegiance, the American flag and all that, national anthem. But the point being, I think you have to take the risk to say, here's what I think and feel, and be willing to have it come back at you. Now, the problem online is that it's so easy to just say, you effing racist, and often it's anonymous. And it's just people's anger. And so if you can remember that, it's more about them than it is about you. It's their anger, their hurt. And I think what Mandela learned in Africa when they did the reparations and the, I forget the exact term, when they were trying to end apartheid, and he was having people come together in the groups, and they would talk about, white and black would talk about their experiences, and whites needed to learn to listen to what black people had experienced. And was it comfortable? No. Was it wanting to defend yourself? Yes. Was it the right thing to do in the beginning? No, just listen. And then you can talk about your experience as a white person and the fears you had. And we're all suffering from this. The fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of going to a neighborhood that you don't think is safe because you've been racially convinced it's not. And there are neighborhoods that aren't safe for anybody, black or white. So you have to be realistic as well as visionary. And I think that finding that balance is challenging. for me. So it took 5 days. I wrote about 4.5 pages. It was really more of a paper than it was a Facebook post. And I had to edit it down. And I said, more to come, because I felt like, I hadn't said enough yet. And I'm still looking at what's my next thing I'm going to post out there. But I do think it's incumbent upon all of us to take a stand, because to not say anything is to be silently complicit, like the 3 officers who didn't stop the officer who, ultimately killed Mr. Floyd.
Jack, with the events of, so at the time of this recording, it's early June of 2020, and many of us have had lives very much changed the last several months with COVID and shelter in place and time. And I know you were saying earlier about how you used to have to go, you did a keynote and it was 2 hours versus having to do the flight there, the day of the thing, and then coming back. So you effectively had 3 days that exchanged 2 hours for 3 days, or maybe 3 days for 2 hours. I'm wondering, has your relationship to how you relate with and experience time altered at all now? Because I take it as you're someone who's very busy, you have a demanding schedule, and you're almost gaining, in a way, time back with experiences like that. Have you found, but then you're at home, which I know a lot of people have struggled with, that piece of being at home, being not able to have the outside stuff that they normally turn to kind of dictate the course of your life. Have you found that your relationship with time has changed at all? And how are you, if so, how are you experiencing it differently now?
I think, well, I like being home. I love speaking live, and I love running trainings. I don't like the air travel. I don't like, the sleeping in hotels and all of that. So there's been a benefit of that. I sleep in my own bed. I'm getting more sleep than I usually do. I'm not getting up at 5 to catch a 6 o'clock plane out of Santa Barbara to connect with something out of Denver to the East Coast. And, but what's true for me is that, and my wife would definitely underline this with a big yes, which is I'm probably working more, not less, in that I get at least 5 requests a day to do what I'm doing with you, because I am a celebrity and people, I guess, care what I have to say. And I've said yes to, I would say, 80% of the invitations I get. Some of them just, the times don't work and I'm busy already, or I don't feel that it's the right venue. But generally, so I'm up in the morning, I'm not having breakfast with my wife. I'm out here doing this. Sometimes the podcast I do is at 5 or 6 o'clock. So we're eating dinner late. I usually have to do preparation. If there's questions in advance, I'd like to know what they are so I can think about them a little bit. Often I'm using slides in my presentation. So I have to make sure, like I did one for India this morning. So all my slides that said, earn 100,000 a year had to be earned, 7 million rupees a year or whatever. And so I spent a lot of time customizing those, which takes time to do. And I'm doing more of that than when I was doing paid speaking. And so my days are very full. And then having started this network marketing thing, that's a new division of our company, that takes a lot of time managing all that. I'm doing opportunity calls where people can come and find out about the oils and the business opportunity, this work from home potential that they have. And so that's another new thing in my agenda. And then when George Floyd took the news, my staff is all going, we have to do something. So I've been on like probably 5 2-hour staff meetings where we're deciding, what do we do? Do we give away free trainings to African Americans or people teaching African Americans? One of the people I mentioned early on is a law professor in Minneapolis, and talking about what can we do for his law school? How can we support his petition? How can we support him in his legal actions? I signed a petition, I put it out on Facebook. So I'm doing a lot more of that just to be socially relevant and make a difference and not be, inactive in that area. So there's a lot of demands on my time. And I would say time is going by faster than it usually does. Because when you do a 1 hour thing like we're doing for however long we do it, 45 minutes or so, that time is over like that. And you do 5 or 6 of those, your whole day's gone. And a lot of the things like answering emails and filing things and putting things away and, opening my mail and paying my bills, and that almost, which I would do like at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, that's not getting done till the weekend and 10 in the morning, on Saturday. And so I have less time with my wife, just less time in general for the average stuff of life Although we did start a 500-piece puzzle last night, worked on it for half an hour. So that was good.
That's good. How many pieces did you get done in 5 hours in a half an hour?
We just took it out of the box and found all the edge pieces. We haven't put them together yet.
Jack, I know I want to be respectful of your time, so let's ask one more question. Having had the experiences you've had, the success you had, there's two parts to this. If you could go back into your life and to give a piece of advice to your younger self, but then a personal piece of advice to your younger self, and then a professional piece of advice to the younger professional version of yourself, that would be something that you wish you knew, you understood, you had at that time, what would that be?
On the personal side, I would have advised myself to have more self-confidence and not be so shy. I was really shy around women for a long part of my life. If I wasn't in a class with them or their lab partner in college, I would never ask them for a date. It was just too scary to go up to a stranger and say, I'm attracted to you. Would you like to go out, have dinner, go to a dance? I mean, it just didn't happen. And so that was a waste of time. I actually found out that the girl I had a crush on all through high school never asked out, had a crush on me. That was one of the most painful moments. I learned that when I was in college. Someone told me who knew her, and I was, oh man, you got to be kidding me. And I think just learning to ask. I was so afraid to ask for anything. Ask for help, ask for support, ask for guidance, ask for money, So I think I missed out on a lot, probably up until I was about 29 years old in that department. So that would be the first thing. I teach now, ask. Don't be afraid of a no, because there's a lot of no's, but you'll get a yes. Just ask more people, ask more often. I think on the professional side, I would say I wish someone had told me to write sooner, because once you've written a book, your ideas are there. The process of writing it forces you to clarify your thinking, because it's one thing to say something, you can always back off on it, you can always come around it, but when you write it down on paper, it's there. And so you have to live with what you've written. So it forces you to think more clearly. If you're contradicting yourself, or you're not clear, or people have questions. And, I think Chicken Soup for the Soul was so successful because we got a lot of feedback on every story. We had a panel of readers, sometimes 40 readers, who would read all the stories, just friends and volunteers, people who wanted to participate, who would give us, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the story? And anything less than a 9, average from 40 people, we wouldn't publish. And that's why the books were so successful. Or we'd edit it until it became a 9, maybe there's something missing it needed. And so feedback, really important. But I think I didn't write until I was much older, and I could have been much more successful because I had a lot to say. I was always a voracious learner. Took a lot of seminars, went to a lot of workshops, read a lot of books. Now I watch TED Talks and YouTube videos, and there's so much more I'd love to get to. I've got a list of like 80 TED Talks I've heard about that I want to watch. We only do so much a day. But those would be the two major things I would say. And I would also say, I would have told myself, always come from service. I think when I was younger, I was just trying to build a career and build my reputation and all that. I've always been a loving person and a humble person. That hasn't changed much. But I think there was too much focus on me and my company instead of just like what I've lived the last, I say 30 years is just, how can I be of more service to more people? That's kind of my guiding question in life.
Everyone, wow, do you want to rewatch, re-listen, take some notes, and most importantly, put into action? Jack gave us so much guidance and wisdom here, from the idea of what happens when the world turns upside down to finding a new way to generate income, not for just him, but his staff, and creating a new business that not only is profitable, but is extremely helpful and supportive of people using it, and finding these new ways to help with PTSD and depression and restless leg syndrome. Who wouldn't want their spouse and significant other have a better night's sleep? Everybody wins with that one, right?
There you go.
To really, what do you do when you feel called to do something, to answering that call, to speaking out? And I love the distinction of not should I, but how should I? I've wrestled with that, and I think many of us have, and it's that understanding that you should, and just what exactly does that look like? And maybe if we can shift our focus to that versus wrestling with the if not, if this and that, it would give us a lot more clarity in how we act. I love the two pieces of advice about going back and asking, gosh, haven't we all found out we had that one person who we had the crush on? And then it only turns out that if only we would have, I have some stories I could tell about that for sure. And, and then to become from more of a place of service, as an entrepreneur, I've wrestled with that, and I appreciate hearing that so much, because especially in this digital day and age where we're bombarded daily with countless ads promising us that if you sign up for this program, you'll earn 7 figures in 38 hours. And it gives you the gimmicks and the playbook, which is really just a tried and way of laying into someone and turning up the fear buttons. But to really just come from a place of service, I can't echo that enough, because I found that my life has been far more enriching and fulfilling with that in mind. I also love the notion of time and not going back to what was, but evolving to what can be now, and looking at how we relate to time differently. And that, where you might have had to take 3 days to accomplish in 2 hours, well, now you can just take the 2 hours and accomplish what you used to take 3 days to do. Perhaps there's other opportunities out there for you and your business, your health, your relationship, making your health a priority, right? At this time that we're all thinking of COVID and what's to come, doing those things to boost your immune system, where it's losing a total of 21 pounds or so, or just
Yeah.
being more fit and active. There's always an opportunity for us to improve ourselves. And I think something that I love and appreciate about Jack is he seems to constantly working on that, and definitely is an example of what he teaches. Jack, thank you so very much for being here. This has been such a blessing. Thank you.
Might I just tell people my website if they
Oh
want to
yeah,
find out
please.
more about my work?
Yeah,
If
please.
you want to, I wrote a book called The Success Principles, if you'd like to read that, and you can go to Amazon.com, of course, but I have a website called jackcanfield.com. Very simple. And if you'd like to know more about the oils, you could send an email to oils@jackcanfield.com, and we'll make sure you get on one of the calls we do to let you know about it. But thanks for the opportunity to share what little bit of wisdom we had time for here today. And Jesse, I just want to acknowledge you for stepping up and stepping out and creating such value in the world. You've done it magnificently and quickly and powerfully. And so I just want everyone to acknowledge you as much as you acknowledge me.
Thanks, Jack. And I'll be sure to have all your links and everything on the website, and going out with whenever everything just gets pushed out into the world.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time on another edition of A Handful of Hope. Bye-bye.
Bye.